The first thing Anna felt when she walked into the room was how loud it was. The laughter bounced off the high glass walls, the kind of laughter that made you feel like you had to be part of it or risk being left behind. People stood in small groups, their voices layered over each other like music without a melody. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor, but no one turned. No one noticed. She stood there for a moment, holding her small black clutch close to her body. She had dressed carefully for tonight. A soft silver dress that caught the light, hair tied back in a neat twist, a quiet smile she had practiced in the mirror. But as her eyes scanned the room, she saw the same pattern over and over, a glance her way, then a quick shift of attention to someone else. The conversations never opened for her. Anna told herself to breathe. She had been in this position before. Rooms like this were full of unspoken rules: who to talk to, how long to stand, when to laugh. It wasn't always cruel, just selective. But tonight, it stung more than usual. Maybe it was the way a group near the center laughed so hard they didn't hear her polite greeting. Maybe it was the way someone's eyes slid right past her, as if she were invisible. She moved to the side of the room where the noise softened just enough for her to hear her own thoughts. She reached for a glass of water from a passing tray, her fingers brushing the cool surface. Her mind started counting the minutes until she could quietly leave. Then she heard her name, not loudly, but in a warm, steady tone. Anna. She turned and saw Sandra Bullock walking toward her, the kind of walk that seemed effortless but had purpose in every step. Sandra's eyes didn't dart around the room like most people's did. They stayed on her, as if she was the only person worth noticing. Anna felt her shoulders drop just a little. "I was wondering where you were," Sandra said, smiling like she meant it. "Come on. You're not standing here by yourself all night." Anna managed a soft laugh. "I didn't want to interrupt anyone." Sandra shook her head gently. "Interrupt? Anna, you belong here as much as anyone. More, probably." Her voice wasn't loud, but something about it cut through the background noise. Before Anna could reply, another voice joined them, calm, low, and familiar. "Sandra, are you stealing her away from me?" Keanu Reeves stood just a few feet away, dressed simply but with that quiet presence that made people notice without him trying. He looked at Anna the same way Sandra did, directly, without scanning past her. It was a kind of attention that didn't feel heavy, but steady, safe. Anna felt something shift inside her. She had walked into this room alone, unnoticed, but now Sandra was standing beside her, and Keanu was smiling in a way that made it clear she wasn't a shadow in the corner anymore. Sandra glanced at Keanu and then at Anna. "I think we can share," she said playfully. Then she slipped her arm gently through Anna's, guiding her toward the center of the room. Keanu walked on the other side of her, as if they were creating a space no one else could close in on. People began turning their heads as they passed. Conversations paused, eyes followed. Not because Sandra or Keanu demanded attention, but because the way they moved made it impossible to ignore the quiet statement they were making. "She is with us." Anna didn't say much at first. She didn't need to. The warmth of their presence filled the silence she had been carrying since she arrived. She could feel the invisible weight lifting, the one that came from being politely overlooked. When they reached a small table near the center, Keanu pulled out a chair for her. "Here," he said softly. "Better view from here." His tone made it sound less like an offer and more like something that should have been done from the start. Sandra leaned closer to Anna, speaking just loud enough for her to hear over the hum of voices. "Sometimes people don't realize how important it is to make space for others. So we do it for them." Anna's chest felt tight for a moment, but not from sadness. It was something closer to relief. The kind that came from realizing you didn't have to fight so hard to be seen. She looked between them, Sandra's warm smile on one side and Keanu's steady gaze on the other, and for the first time that night, She didn't feel like she had to prove she belonged here. She already did. What she didn't know yet was that this moment, this small, simple act of being brought into the circle, would set off a chain of events she could never have expected. The room still buzzed with the same noise, but to Anna it suddenly felt different, safer, and far from over. And somewhere in the back of her mind she began to wonder, maybe she wouldn't want to leave early after all. Anna sat between them, her fingers loosely wrapped around the glass of water she had taken earlier. The conversations around her still swirled like before, but something had shifted. It wasn't louder or quieter, it was simply less sharp. She didn't feel the sting of being on the outside anymore. Sandra leaned in a little, her voice warm. You know, I remember my first time at something like this. I stood near the food table the whole night because I didn't know anyone. People kept brushing past me like I was part of the furniture. Anna smiled faintly. What changed? Sandra shrugged. Someone noticed. That's all it takes sometimes. One person who says, "Hey, you matter here." She glanced at Keanu, who was quietly listening. Or, in your case, two people. Keanu's eyes met Anna's for a moment. He didn't fill the air with unnecessary words. Instead, he gave a small nod as if to say he understood without needing to explain. A waiter approached with a tray of drinks, offering them across the table. Sandra took a glass of sparkling water. Keanu shook his head politely, and Anna hesitated before accepting one. She didn't usually drink at these events, but somehow it felt okay now. As they sipped, a few people began drifting toward their table, people who had ignored Anna earlier. One man leaned in with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Anna, I didn't see you earlier. You should have said hello. Anna opened her mouth to reply, but Sandra spoke first, her tone light yet unmistakably firm. We saw her, she said. We made sure she didn't have to stand alone. The man laughed awkwardly, muttered something about getting another drink, and left. Anna blinked, not sure whether to feel embarrassed or grateful. Keanu broke the silence. Some people only see you when someone else tells them to. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but there was weight behind the words. Anna glanced down at her hands, then back up. I guess I'm still learning how to be okay in rooms like this. Sandra smiled at her, and there was no trace of pity in it, only understanding. Then we'll help you. Right, Keanu? Keanu's answer was simple. Of course. The three of them sat together, and slowly, the people who had ignored Anna earlier began to approach in a different way. Some asked her questions. Others laughed at her quiet jokes. It wasn't because she had suddenly changed, but because Sandra and Keanu made it impossible for her to be overlooked. Anna noticed something else, too. Whenever someone interrupted her or tried to talk over her, Sandra would pause and give Anna the space to finish her thought. When someone dismissed her comment, Keanu would bring it back into the conversation. It wasn't loud or confrontational. It was subtle, but it made all the difference. After a while, the three of them stepped away from the table. Sandra suggested they walk toward the balcony for some air. The night was cool, the city lights stretching out like a sea of gold. Anna leaned on the railing, letting the wind brush against her face. Keanu stood beside her, looking out at the skyline. You know, he said quietly, kindness isn't just about helping someone when they fall. Sometimes it's about making sure they don't have to stand alone in the first place. Anna looked at him, her voice soft. Thank you, both of you. Sandra touched her arm. Don't thank us. Just remember to do the same for someone else one day. Anna nodded, and in that moment, she understood something. What had happened tonight wasn't just about being included in a conversation. It was about being seen, truly seen, and treated like she mattered, without conditions. But she didn't know yet that the night was far from over. There was still an unexpected turn waiting for them, one that would test just how far that kindness could go. The air on the balcony felt cleaner than inside, but it carried a strange tension now, the kind that comes when you sense something is about to happen, even if you can't explain why. Anna rested her hands on the railing, staring at the city lights, letting the hum of distant traffic fill the silence. Sandra stepped back inside for a moment, saying she needed to grab something. Keanu stayed by Anna's side, his presence quiet but steady. "You're different tonight," he said gently, his eyes still on the skyline. Anna tilted her head. "Different how?" "More yourself," he replied. "Like you're not trying to fit the room anymore. The room is adjusting to you." She didn't know what to say to that, so she just let the words settle in her chest. But before she could respond, the balcony door swung open with a sudden force. Two men stepped out, both carrying the kind of energy that made the air feel colder. They weren't drunk, but there was something sharp in their eyes, the kind of sharpness that didn't come from alcohol. One of them gave a tight smile. "Anna, right?" She turned slowly, unsure. "Yes?" "Funny," the man continued. "We were just talking about you inside, about how some people get more attention than they earn." Keanu's gaze shifted from the skyline to the man, slow and deliberate. He didn't speak yet, but something in the way he stood changed. His shoulders set, his expression unreadable. The other man leaned on the railing across from Anna. "Don't get us wrong," he said. "We've got nothing against you. Just saying, not everyone in there sees what Sandra and Keanu apparently see." Anna's chest tightened. The words weren't shouted, but they cut deep. Before she could find her voice, Keanu stepped forward, his tone calm but firm. "Careful with your words." The first man smirked. "Oh, come on, we're just being honest." Keanu didn't move closer, but his presence filled the space. "Honesty without kindness isn't honesty," he said. "It's just cruelty in disguise." Anna glanced toward the balcony door, hoping Sandra would return. But then, almost as if the timing had been planned, Sandra reappeared, and she didn't look surprised to see what was happening. She walked up to the two men, her smile as steady as it was sharp. "Are we having a polite conversation, or should I ask you to take it somewhere else?" The first man shifted uncomfortably. "We were just talking." "No," Sandra interrupted, her voice still even, but leaving no room for argument. "You were making someone feel small. That's not a conversation. That's a performance." There was a moment of silence, the city lights flickering behind them. The two men glanced at each other, then muttered something about getting a drink, disappearing back inside. Anna let out a slow breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Keanu's voice softened. "You don't have to answer people like that. Sometimes the best answer is letting them see they can't move you." Sandra touched Anna's shoulder. "But when you do answer, make sure it's on your terms, not theirs." Anna nodded slowly. She felt the sting of the men's words, but also the strange strength of having stood through it without breaking. What she didn't know yet was that this moment, as small as it seemed, would echo before the night was over, because the people who had ignored her earlier were now watching, and they had seen everything. When they stepped back inside, the atmosphere felt different. The same music played, the same laughter rippled across the room, but now eyes followed them in a way Anna hadn't felt before. Not with curiosity alone. There was a quiet respect in some of those glances, and something else in others, a mix of guilt and realization. Sandra led the way to a quieter corner near a tall, potted plant. Keanu stayed close, scanning the room without making it obvious. Anna could still feel the echo of those words from the balcony, but now they seemed smaller compared to the calm she felt standing with them. "Don't let it take root," Sandra said, reading her expression. "Words like that, if you carry them home, they grow." Anna gave a faint smile. Easier said than done. Keanu finally spoke, his voice low and steady. It gets easier when you remember who's worth listening to. Before Anna could respond, a woman in a navy blue dress approached, someone who had barely looked at her earlier in the evening. She hesitated before speaking. Anna, I saw what happened outside. I should have said something sooner. I'm sorry. Anna blinked, caught off guard. You don't have to. I do, the woman said quickly. I've been in your place before. I know how it feels. She glanced at Sandra and Keanu. And you're lucky to have them. Sandra smiled warmly. We're all lucky when we decide to have each other's backs. The woman stayed for a few minutes, joining their conversation. Little by little, others began to drift over too, some curious, some offering quiet words of support. Anna started to notice a pattern. The people who had ignored her earlier now seemed eager to connect. She didn't know if it was out of genuine kindness or discomfort at having witnessed what happened, but she didn't push them away. Still, she wasn't naive. She could feel the difference between those who meant it and those who were simply following the shift in the room's mood. At one point, Keanu leaned closer and said, Attention changes fast, but respect, real respect, comes slower. Give it time. Anna nodded, letting his words sink in. She thought about how quickly a night could change, how the same people could look right through you one moment and then try to stand beside you the next. And then, almost as if the universe wanted to test her again, she overheard two voices behind her. Guess she's popular now, one man muttered. Must be nice having Sandra and Keanu do your talking. Anna froze. Her first instinct was to turn around and defend herself, but then she felt Sandra's hand brush lightly against her arm, a silent reminder. Instead of reacting, Anna took a slow sip of her drink, then turned back to her conversation with the woman in the navy dress. She didn't give the comment any oxygen. Keanu, however, had heard it too, and though he didn't say a word, his eyes found the man across the room. There was nothing hostile in his gaze, but there was a clarity there, the kind that made people think twice. The rest of the night unfolded in smaller, quieter moments. People who mattered stayed close, conversations grew deeper, and the noise of the crowd faded into the background. But as the evening neared its end, something unexpected happened. The host of the event approached their group with a microphone in hand. Before we wrap up, he said, smiling at the crowd, I want to say something about the importance of presence and making space for others. He looked directly at Anna. Her heart began to race. She had no idea what was coming next. Anna felt the weight of every pair of eyes in the room turn toward her. The microphone in the host's hand seemed to make the silence heavier, even though music still played faintly in the background. She glanced at Sandra, then at Keanu. Both of them gave her a small, reassuring nod, as if to say she didn't need to fear what was coming. The host stepped closer. Tonight was about more than just networking or celebration, he said, his voice carrying across the room. It was about connection, and sometimes we forget that connection means looking around and noticing who might be standing on the edges. He paused, scanning the crowd before continuing. I saw something happen tonight that reminded me why kindness is the most important thing we can bring into a room. Anna, would you mind joining me for a moment? Anna's chest tightened. Her feet felt heavy, but Sandra's gentle touch on her back urged her forward. Keanu stayed just behind her as she walked toward the host. When she reached him, the host turned to the crowd. Many of you may not have noticed, but when Anna arrived tonight, she wasn't exactly welcomed into the fold. I know because I saw it, and I also saw how quickly that changed. Not because she demanded attention, but because two people here decided she mattered enough to stand with. He gestured toward Sandra and Keanu, and the room's attention shifted to them for a moment. They didn't move, didn't wave, didn't make it about themselves. They simply stood there, calm and steady. And here's the thing, the host went on. What they did, any of us could have done. But they chose to act. They chose to notice. And because of that, this room is different now. Anna swallowed hard, unsure what to say. She wasn't used to being at the center of moments like this. The host leaned toward her, his voice softer but still audible. If you'd like to say something, now's your chance. She hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment. But then she remembered Keanu's words on the balcony. Sometimes the best answer is letting them see they can't move you. Anna took a small breath. I don't have a long speech, she began. Her voice was calm, steady. But I will say this. I've been in rooms where I felt invisible. And it's easy to believe that's just how it's going to be. Tonight, I learned that sometimes it only takes one person, or two, to remind you that you're not invisible at all. And when that happens, you start to believe you belong here. You start to believe you belong anywhere. The room was silent for a moment, not because they didn't know how to react, but because they were listening. Then the applause began. It wasn't loud or rushed. It was steady, warm. Anna stepped back toward Sandra and Keanu, her heart still pounding. Sandra wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and Keanu gave her the kind of look that said everything without a single word. But even as the night seemed to settle into a calmer rhythm, Anna could feel something lingering in the air, a quiet shift that wasn't just about her anymore. The people in the room had seen a different kind of strength tonight. And the truth was, it wasn't over yet. Something was still coming, and she could feel it in the way Keanu kept glancing toward the entrance, as if he was waiting for something, or someone. Anna followed Keanu's gaze toward the entrance. The crowd had thinned a little, but the air still hummed with quiet conversation. She saw a tall man step into the room, his expression unreadable, scanning the space until his eyes landed on her. There was something about the way he moved, slow, deliberate, that made her chest tighten. She didn't know him, but from the corner of her eye she caught the smallest change in Keanu's stance. He wasn't tense, but he was alert. Sandra noticed it too and shifted slightly so she was between Anna and the approaching man. When he reached them, he stopped just far enough to keep a respectful distance. "You're Anna," he said, his tone neutral. "Yes," she replied carefully. He hesitated before speaking again. "I owe you an apology. Earlier tonight, I was one of the people who looked right past you. Not because I meant to be unkind, but because I didn't stop to notice. That's on me." Anna blinked. She hadn't expected this. "It's easy to miss people when you think the night is only about yourself," he went on. "But then I saw what happened on the balcony. I saw how you handled it, how you didn't shrink, even when it would have been easier to just leave. And I realized that's the kind of person I should have been talking to from the start." There was no performative smile, no empty charm. He looked at her as if he truly meant what he said. Anna took a moment before answering. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you might think." Keanu and Sandra didn't speak, but their presence was enough to steady her voice. The man nodded once, then stepped away, disappearing back into the crowd. Anna turned to Sandra. "That was unexpected." Sandra smiled faintly. "Kindness has a way of traveling further than you think, even when you don't see it." Keanu added quietly, "And sometimes the people you least expect are the ones who learn from it." The three of them found a quieter spot near the exit as the night wound down. The conversations in the room had shifted, not completely, but noticeably. People were making space for others. Smaller groups had opened into wider circles. It was subtle, but it was there. Anna realized something as she stood with them. The night hadn't been about winning attention or proving her worth. It had been about being reminded that her worth was never in question to begin with. When they finally stepped outside, the city air was cool and clean. Streetlights cast soft gold across the pavement. Sandra linked her arm through Anna's, Keanu walking just beside them. Anna looked at the two of them, her voice quiet but sure. "I don't think I'll forget tonight." Sandra squeezed her arm gently. "You shouldn't. But more importantly, don't let anyone else forget it either." Keanu gave a small smile. "Next time, you'll be the one bringing someone into the circle." Anna nodded. "I will." As they walked down the sidewalk, the noise of the event fading behind them, she felt lighter. Not because everyone in that room had changed, but because she had. And in her heart, she knew this truth. Kindness didn't just save the night. It had changed it. And it would keep changing nights like this for as long as people chose to see each other. The three of them disappeared into the glow of the street, and for Anna, the city didn't feel so big anymore. It felt like it had made room for her.